push the button. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our County Commission meeting this morning. As always, we'd like to start with a prayer, reading, or a thought.
You're not in your microphone enough.
Are they on?
They're on. They just
Okay.
went up very loud.
We're going to start with a prayer, reading, or thought, and then the Pledge of Allegiance. And we are looking for, I see a lot of hands going up over there already.
Yeah.
We're looking for volunteers who would like to participate in our commission meeting this morning and be willing to say a prayer, reading, thought, or lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Any volunteers, just raise your hand, and then we'll have you come up and state your name as well. No one's daring enough, huh, on that one?
I'll do pledge.
Pledge? Okay, I think I did the prayer last
Yeah,
time.
it's probably my turn.
Thank you.
Our dear, kind Heavenly Father, we're indeed grateful for the opportunity we have to meet as members and leaders of Utah County to discuss the business before the county. Heavenly Father, we ask Thee for Thy Spirit to be with us, that we may have the spirit of understanding and of peace, that we may, and a sense of obligation, that we may do the will of the people. And we ask Thee to have a special blessing to continue to be upon our community and bless those that serve us and protect us, especially the men and women that do so unwavering. We have a special appreciation and love for them. We ask You to continue to watch over them, bless them and their families. We ask You to please bless us in every way, that we may continue to show our love and appreciation to Thee for the area in which we live and the bounteous blessing that we enjoy. And these things we humbly pray for in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, for informational purposes, as we go through our agenda, if you have a question about one of the items, you can come up, state your name, and speak on that agenda item. And at the end of the meeting, if you have general comments other than the agenda items, you can do the same at the very end. So with that, this morning, we have the opportunity, oh, there it is, to recognize somebody. His name is Darren Slight. Darren. Come on up. He is our Employee of the Month. You just stand right there. Of course, I just introduced your name, so you don't have to do that. And I'm going to read a few things about you, and then you have the opportunity at the end to say a few words if you'd like. All right, these are some of the words that others have written about you. The Employee of the Month system undoubtedly isn't fair. If it were, Darren Slight would have probably won most every month since he began working for the county 15 years ago. The GIS division in Utah County Information Systems Department is tasked with providing geographic-based mapping, database, and analysis solutions to the county. These solutions often require the development of applications or automated database functions, which you might think about how you can talk about that and put it into English for everybody else. As the GIS manager, I am so grateful to have Darren as the lead programmer in the GIS division. In the last 5 years alone, he has played a key role in developing several essential programs for the Records Office, Assessor's Office, Mosquito Abatement, the Health Department, and now the Engineering Division and Public Works, just to name a few. It is important to note that these programs are not just convenient helps to those departments, but are typically mission-critical platforms, essential for the execution of their core county functions. As such, the pressure is high to get these tools right. And with Darren, we would not be able to do In fact, he handles this pressure with ease and always being positive, helpful, considerate, and humble. And so with that, Darren, thank you for the work that you do. And there's more that others have written. I'll give you this sheet so you can keep it. And we have this little award here to give you and some extra little prizes that are in there too. So thank you for being who you are and what you do in the county.
I never realized the family resemblance between you and Kevin until just now. So, thank you.
Yeah, turn right up for a picture and then you get your speech.
Thank you.
I guess you'll tell us later on what all that was all about. All right, that's fine. Okay, with that, now we'll move into our agenda that we have presently, and those that were here for Darren, thanks for coming.
Now go get us faster internet.
All right, on our consent agenda, we have 14 items. I don't have any of them that I need to pull off.
Willow Grove finally can really move, right?
Is that one?
We were laying up money on this one. Okay.
Okay. Are there any other items that are on consent that we need to pull off? Okay. Okay, moving to the regular agenda, so everything will go on to consent except for which we note. We need to have discussion on number 2. And then on consent to strike number 3 as that was requested. Number 5, 6, and 7, if we could hold those as well for discussion.
Works for me.
There's, okay, and then we will set the closed meetings after. Okay, so let's move to number 2.
You're hoping third time's a charm, right?
Be good to get some of these things moved along. I keep coming back for the same things, Willow Grove, minor subdivisions.
This minor subdivision one, we've talked about a little bit, a couple of weeks, and then also if you can just kind of mention, not just the minor subdivisions, but also the text amendment as well, and just kind of give us a summary on what
Sure.
we're doing here.
So what we've done after receiving feedback from the commission, we went in there and we went into the text amendment, and we have essentially made the. I think this is going to end up being a good thing. The planning commission will these 1 and 2 lot subdivisions wouldn't go to the planning commission. That will save them I don't know, a good half, probably 30 days. They would come to the county commission. County Commission will retain decision-making on bonds and road dedications, things like that. And some of there's a few things related to subdivisions, such as water. There's certain technical questions, decisions that have to be made by the County Commission, and that decision-making will be retained by the County Commission. And so really this thing got stripped down quite a bit from what we originally proposed, a little more concise. And so we feel like what we've got here now is really going to benefit the public. We feel it'll benefit the county as a whole. So noticing requirements, we just basically took out the noticing requirements we had originally proposed. these minor subdivisions will be noticed like any other plat. They'll be, an adjacent property owner will be given a mailed notice 10 days prior to an application going to you, to the county commission. Noxious weeds, Commissioner Ivy, you brought up a question about the bond amount. Oddly enough, we went back and found that there was a 20-year-old text amendment that was never put in the books for some reason. So actually the bond amount is $500 with the $5,000 max.
Instead of 1,000.
Yeah, instead of 1,000. So I don't know. I did reach out to Aaron Eager, weed control, noxious or the weed board here in the county, and I asked him what he thought about the bond amount, and I'm still waiting to hear back from him. So I want to get a little more feedback. But I think that's if there's a desire to change the bond amount, I think we can do that in a future text change. So I'd hate to hold this up for that issue. We've honestly, as far as I know, have never had anybody ever use the weed bond. So
That was gonna be one of my questions, if we
Yeah.
had anyone use it.
no one's ever used it as far as I know. They've just usually waited a couple months to utilize the window of time when those certifications can be done. So, but all in all, I think we've got a pretty good text amendment that we can give to you and perhaps take back to the planning commission now for further consideration. And of course, this proposal now includes a provision that would allow the county commission to, rather than have to send these text amendments back, you would be able to act.
Approve,
Well-
deny, or modify.
Yep, exactly. So that's, I guess, where we're at in a nutshell. So
Perfect. I just had a couple kind of
Sure.
clarification questions. You answered most of them. Thank you.
Okay.
The one thing I did have a question on is you have your 1 year expiration, and in there you say examples of good cause shown why we might grant extension of that 1 year time period. I was just curious what in your mind might be a good cause
for expiration of the
for
bonds.
extension of the expiration, because it's set to expire at 1 year. But you built in what I felt was a good clause, because it gives us the authority, if the applicant comes to us and petitions to grant extension of that year. I was just curious, in your mind, what would be something that would be good cause in that particular instance, should it occur?
It's usually Public Works who deals with those matters, and so I'm not exactly sure what a good cause would be. I don't know if Richard would have a comment on why we would release those bonds early for a good cause shown.
And again, this is just more, I'm just curious as to,
Like extending the time
Yeah.
for completion.
Yeah,
One of
what-
the things
what
we'd
would
look
be a
at
good one?
is like if you had a road that needed to be constructed, that maybe their 1 year fell in January.
Mm-hmm.
And, they obviously can't pave at the end. They didn't get paved before the paving window closed, and so we'd need to extend it out into the summertime for, being able to pave it, something like that.
okay, perfect, and that's,
That would still be at the commission's discretion, right,
Yeah.
on that,
Yes.
on the extension?
Yes.
Yeah, we could make
So
them
we
pave
could-
in 30-degree weather. It just wouldn't last for
We
a
wouldn't,
month.
we wouldn't recommend it from a public works standpoint, so.
and, all right, and I appreciate that, because that was one of the clauses I thought you'd built in there that was excellent, because again, it kind of protected the applicant and give them an opportunity, should an expiration be approaching, to come to the elected official and petition it for good cause, for reasons like that they could then have that extended. So there was an avenue always open and available for them to continue with their process should they run into trouble. The other question I had, and I think it's in there from my perspective, I want yours as well. You think we have sufficient protection against a large-scale development occurring under the guise of a small scale? Where someone comes in and just does a series of these really small ones to kind of skirt the process. I think that would be from what you've gotten this, I think that's an inconvenience, but I just wanted your perspective. Have we crafted enough protection against abuse of the system into it?
Yeah, I think we have actually put enough in there. We've got basically a provision that says that if once you've done 2 lots, you can't divide your land further for the next 5 years. And so we thought that was sufficient. We kind of like, as we've gone through this process, we looked at a couple of other counties. Uintah County had some language that we thought was wise. We'd actually drafted up something different. And then when we saw what Uintah County did, we thought it was kind of a little bit easier to manage. There was kind of a definitive time frame for how long we would worry about whether or not land had been divided and whether or not they could utilize that minor subdivision provision. So,
Can I ask you a question along those
Sure.
lines?
mhm.
The 5 years sounds good. What if it changes ownership? Is it land, are we tying this to the land, or are we tying this to the individual?
The thought was to tie it to the land. We had a historical process in our office that was tied to the owner, and that became pretty tough to manage. And so the thought was to tie it to the land.
So if somebody else purchases that property, then they would have to wait out whatever period of time was left if they wanted, because obviously they're not gonna purchase the property that had already been divided out, because that's somebody else's property.
Right,
But they may have,
Hey.
a part of that land.
exactly,
If it
yeah.
incorporates into maybe a larger chunk of land, I mean, you'd have this separation, right? This land here has to hold for 5 years, but then if they own this over here, they could probably move on it.
Right. Well, the thought was, so if occasionally we'll have a subdivision where they'll take 2 or 3 lots, and so you'll have 2 or 3 lots that were actually involved in the subdivision. So any land that was involved in the original subdivision would be tied up for that 5
Okay.
years.
So I don't remember reading that specific in here,
Mm-hmm.
tied to the land. Is there anything that we need to add?
We
To
could
do that?
we could certainly add that. I think that might be a good clarification, actually, to point out that it's tied to the land and not the owner. So we can definitely add that.
Otherwise, going along the lines of, large development there, you could just switch it to your son or to your wife, and then you could just keep building.
Sure.
It was just tied to the person.
Yeah, no, that's a good thought. We can definitely add that, so.
Any other questions?
Robert Moore, County Attorney's Office, just to also respond, you remember, this 5 years would not prevent them from developing, it would just prevent them from going through the minor subdivision process.
Exactly. If they wanted to go, yes,
could go
the
through the
large
regular
scale,
process.
and I
Go through the
get
large
that,
scale.
yeah, thank you, that's a great clarification. I've got a couple questions on page 7,
Okay.
under county commission, and this is more of hopefully just for understanding why there's a word in there that, it's a county commission agenda, and it says upon receipt of the application, the planning commission, a recommendation for community development, the county commission shall, not the word shall, place the matter on its agenda for review and action. And I'm wondering why the word shall is in there instead of may, because usually, the county commission, one of the commissioners has to initiate putting something onto the agenda. And this almost states as if the commission doesn't have a choice of putting it on. It's gonna be on, because there's a shall in there. And the same wording is also in number 14 as well.
Yeah.
So just for why the shall and not a may? Because later on, you have a lot of, may do this, may do that. Just wondering on the shall.
I'm not sure why the shall's in there. That certainly wasn't a change for this proposal, but we
Right.
could certainly change it to may. I don't see an issue with having a discretion built in there. So that's something that we could easily change.
This would be an administrative procedure, though, so it would be required that there be action taken on it. It wouldn't be discretionary as to whether to take action or not. So to that extent, the shall is probably appropriate. Although I think you would have discretion as to what meeting it was put on, which agenda. Does it say the next agenda? If it says that, that ought to be changed, but it is an administrative action, so that it would require that there be action taken.
It doesn't say
It
anything
doesn't
about
say that,
that.
it just says on its agenda.
So
So
you're,
shall without a timeline you feel is appropriate.
so work that through with me a little bit further.
So when you're reviewing this proposed subdivision, it's not a legislative action, it's an administrative proceeding. So that means that there's less discretion, and it's required that we follow the process that's in the ordinance, and which would require that there be a decision made. And so the commission really wouldn't have discretion as to not putting it on an agenda.
And that's what the shall is saying, is that we don't have discretion of putting it on the agenda.
Correct.
And I
But
think
we
Wouldn't
can still
specify
pick
which
which
agenda,
week.
but there, it would be required that there be that action taken.
the action taken.
So that's, I think, why there is the term shall instead of may, because it really is not discretionary to the extent that you have to take action.
So you're saying basically that if there wasn't a commissioner, for whatever reason, I can't imagine one, but for whatever reason, a commissioner thought, well, I don't want this on the agenda, it could sit in there indefinitely until
we-
the
we-
year expires.
We could not do that, that's what I'm saying. It needs to go on an agenda. I mean, I think you have some discretion, is it the next agenda or, a week later or 2 weeks later? But I think there's I
Well,
don't know
and
if there's a timeline built in or not, but it would need to go on an agenda.
Well, our own timeline is
Reasonable time.
by ordinance, the Wednesday, the end of business Wednesday, all documents, everything completed. So
Yeah.
we
but
have
I'm-
an ordinance for getting stuff on the agenda.
Sure. But as long as you meet the timelines set forth in the ordinance, I think you would have some discretion as to which one, but you couldn't say, we're not gonna do it, or we're gonna postpone it indefinitely.
And I think this is a protection back against the applicant, so if for some reason there was a rift between the commissioners and the applicant, we couldn't deny them when they had met all the statutory requirements,
Correct.
the opportunity to be heard in the commission meeting.
Box Elder South used a kind of a section of the state code that I'd never seen used before, and it essentially says that, basically makes it so you have to take action on the item. You just can't sit on it indefinitely.
Right.
I can't remember which provision that was, but I think you'll remember that.
Yeah, it's in the state code where, in these administrative actions, there are deadlines,
Okay.
and those can be triggered to where you have to take action by a specified date.
Yeah, I'm just sensitive to administrative actions superseding the commission being able to put things on the agenda. And then that's the reason why I was asking the question on it, because
Yeah.
this is a case where it looks like that it does that, where it's saying that. And of course, it's doing that because the process has been followed all along, is what
Right.
you're saying, and an action needs to be taken, either accepting, denying, or modifying.
Right. Because in this instance, the Board of County Commissioners is acting in an administrative capacity instead of a legislative capacity. So you have somewhat of a different hat
Yeah.
that you're wearing when you're reviewing these.
So we wouldn't even have to do it in a county commission meeting then if it's administrative. Hey, I'm not gonna go there.
Little play on words there, but yeah.
Okay. Other discussion items? Thank you for, coming back and doing that work and getting everything ready so we can review it and
Very good.
take some action on it.
We'll have it back to you in a couple weeks.
Wait, what do you mean you'll have it back to us in a couple weeks?
Planning Commission meets on May 16th, and after that, we can bring it back after they've given a recommendation on this.
That's only if we,
If you do something, yes, sorry.
yes,
I'm
okay.
kind of jumping the gun here.
You had me on a
little bit.
pause there for a second.
Yeah, sorry.
We need to-
like, did you know
Anxious-
votes that I'm not aware of?
Yeah.
Anxious to move it on, sorry. Getting ahead of a little bit
Okay, we'll
ahead of
take
myself.
action on it and then
Sure.
we'll let it go through the process. Yes.
Sure, yep.
Okay. All right, seeing no other questions, a motion would be in order.
I'll move that we adopt a regular agenda, the ordinance is stated in regular agenda item 2.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance as stated in number 2.
Discussion real quick.
Yes.
Before we move on that, in case I need to amend it, did we want to take action potentially on the bond now for language, or wait and have that come back?
I'd probably wait and have that come
Okay,
back under the
fantastic.
Yeah.
anticipation
I
that
think
will
they're gonna
hopefully
change it
have
to
an
the 500
answer.
anyway, just because of the text amendment that's already out there, correct?
It's,
Well, it was never adopted, that text amendment, that's why I'm saying,
Yeah, the 500 was changed 20 years ago, and the ordinance was never reflective of that change. So officially, the 500 is what
Is-
is on the books.
Yes.
What's on the book.
Now, just for clarification, is this being referred back to the planning commission for,
Well, because we don't have a choice at this point.
right,
If the votes go through for the adoption, yes, it'd have to.
right,
After
this will be
is-
the last one.
After this
Yes.
is done, then we do, yes, as I see it.
So technically, you're not adopting this ordinance today, you're just, the motion should be amended that since you've modified this, that it would be a referral back to the planning commission for
Okay.
their recommendation.
I will amend my motion to such stipulations by
Wait,
Mr.
wait,
Shawcroft.
Sure. Can we adopt that first one and then do this? Because again, I'm being sensitive, there are people, why can't we adopt the text amendment on this thing? And on the
Because you've
referral
changed
back?
it, you've modified it from what it came to you as from the planning commission.
But we
Oh,
still
no.
can reject what the planning commission says, so what's the point?
You could reject it, but,
And then approve our own amendment.
well, you can't approve that under current ordinance until you have a recommendation from them.
We still have to get the recommendation back.
That's, yeah,
Hey,
and that's required by,
Asinine as it seems.
by
we still
state
have to
law.
get-
Okay,
I know there are people out there that are waiting to move on some of this stuff, and it's
That's why
causing
they-
okay, so
problems.
I'll amend my
Back to you
motion so
soon.
that we can move this
Yeah.
process and hopefully it'll be back May 16th.
Yep, okay. You're fine with that as a second on that motion? Okay. I got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Thank you. Okay, number 3, we struck number 3. Number 5, I just wanted to make a statement on this one. Since we did this for one entity, I think that it'd be appropriate for us to do it for another who is asking for similar consideration. This is for the SAM Club to conduct some marketing, like with Costco's,
Yep.
right?
And they have done it in the past. We just have a clause in the building use policy that they have to have permission from the commission to do it, so.
Yep. So a motion to be in order.
I'll move that we I'll move that we approve the request from Sam's Club as stated in regular agenda item number 5.
Second?
We've got a motion and a second to approve agenda item number 5 as stated. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay. Okay. Number 6. This one's got 3 lines on it that we need to fill out.
Mhm.
And I was hoping to have a text here. Not gonna happen. So what we're doing here as a community performance plan, Rocky Mountain Power, as a premier company here, they wanna deal with Utah County, and they would like to have some direction on plan and kind of what they do is outlined, is they have 3 lines in which we can suggest to them things that we would like to have done or that they can work on. One of them that I'd like, this is discussion for us, a little bit from a conversation we had yesterday with EDCU, is I would like them to work with EDCU on the mega site proposals that we're working here in the state, and find ways to help facilitate, or at least give them what it would take to get at least a 10 megawatt power down to some of these sites for future. That would be one. Is there others that you would like to have them look at? Again, I was hoping for a text to come in from them that would give me a little more clarification.
From Rocky Mountain or from EDC?
Yeah, a little bit more specific.
To me, that one makes sense. When I read this one, I honestly scratched my head a little bit and was trying to think, because the first thing that came to my mind was continued improved service to the citizens at a lower cost or a competitive cost. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of a generic thought, but anytime we have the opportunity to advocate for, benefits to the citizens, I think we could do that. And so I would put it somewhat generically as just to continue to push for improved service at lowered or, minimal costs to the citizens. That was the one I came up with.
How about our discussion when it comes to power outages. There was some
Yeah.
discussion that we had on power outages
Some
and
technology,
coordination.
coordination.
Yeah, should we put that in there too as a
I
third?
think we should.
So we'll work those up. Hopefully Renee's got some ideas of what we're looking at to write down there for them, and then we'll send this back to them with those three.
So we'd have,
And we'll ratify it next week,
Yeah, I think.
or put it
easier.
on and adopt it either way.
What do you prefer?
I'm okay ratifying, knowing that
That way we
those
have-
are the three things we're gonna do. We're just gonna make them grammatically correct and
right, so we would, working with EDCU on mega sites, improve customer service at good rates, and technology advances in dealing with power outages
And
and
notifications.
notification.
Okay.
So with that, we probably need to continue this 1 week then,
Well, we
unless we
need
want
to
to just.
strike it because it's only down as a discussion, nothing for adoption or acceptance.
True. Okay, let's do that.
Motion to strike 6 from the agenda.
Second?
And a motion and a second to strike number 6. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay, let's see, that one's strike. And we'll have a complete form afterwards, next week. All right, number 7 is, deals with a dress code with Human Resource Management, HR Department. Amy?
Do you have questions about it, or do you want me to explain it? Or?
Yeah, explain, we're here, why we're here,
Okay,
what's going on, and the thought process behind it.
sure. The thought process behind having a dress code is to just have an outlined standard to come to work. A professional overall business attire requirement. Instructions on how to wear your employee badge, and then just a basic instruction for grooming.
Okay. One question I have on this, is this coming top down, or is it coming department up? I mean, is it a discussion with the department, or is it a discussion?
Oh, as far
In
as
a way, is this, and maybe I'll preface it a little bit. I mean, I read down through some of this stuff, and there's lots of things that I agree with on it. I think that fit. My concern is that when you start something like this, it's easier to get everybody on board, kind of first, and then those who come later already kind of know the culture and everything with it. And
Okay.
it makes it a lot easier to kind of go forward. If it comes from top down, then sometimes it feels like it might have different meanings for whatever purpose or
Okay.
reason. So I'm just wondering, is it bottom up, top down?
No, it would be top down. We've had these discussions as we go in what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, but we haven't ever had anything written. As far as everyone voting on what we want, we haven't done that.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I would recommend that it would probably be a better discussion for within the the organization itself as it's new, because this is brand new. There's no amending a current
Correct.
dress code policy.
Correct.
And then, getting buy-in from everybody. That would be
Okay.
my recommendation. I would prefer,
You want to hold it a week and we can have our discussion? We have staff meeting
Well-
right after this.
I would
If we're gonna do that, then what we would wanna do is strike it. You could use this
Okay.
as the outline, have them help modify or vote
Okay.
on it, and then put it back on, and we could take action based on what your team recommends. I think that's kinda,
yeah, that's kind of thought
That-
more along
Is
the
that
lines.
typical to have the whole team decide?
Well, the
how to
only reason,
dress?
you can go either direction with it.
Uh-huh.
And I recognize this, but I think for this circumstance,
Okay.
and especially with the smallness of your organization, it's an easy decision or an easy discussion
Yeah.
to be had. Obviously, you can go the other direction, And say,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
in Public Works, they don't say, hey, do you want to wear your hard hat or not? I mean, it is, you wear your hard hat. You know,
Right.
There are
We
certain
hope.
things. Yeah, we're hoping. But, I mean,
Okay.
I think in this circumstance, it would be,
Sure,
I would like
we can do
to
that.
see more of a discussion, because they're gonna live by it. And again, when others come in, that's kind of the culture,
Right,
and it's easier to go through.
okay, so we'll strike it and then add it back on.
I'll just ask you a couple questions
Sure.
quickly that you can go through in your conversation that I had on it rigor anyway.
Okay.
I was just curious, is consistent with other departments throughout the county, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is your department is one of the few that doesn't have a dress code, is that correct?
Correct.
And so this is trying to get consistency throughout the county so that
Yeah, every
employees have direction?
department
Okay,
can put together their policy, but they have to put it before myself and before you, before it's accepted.
right, and so then I would just want to ensure that it was kind of consistent with other departments throughout the county that provide similar function and have similar interaction with the public, right? So that we're having some consistency there.
Right.
And
We
then,
probably wouldn't go as formal as, say, the attorney's office.
right, and that would be why
Be
I'd
similar
preface
to
that
the
with
health.
perform similar functions and have similar interaction with the public. If there's a comparable or not, it's hard to say, but,
Our customers are internal. We don't deal with the public except for applicants.
okay, so that was just, one thought I was looking at is just for a consistency standard there. And then the only other question I have, and this would probably apply to this one and all of them, in how we are enforcing, the enforcement method, and then any type of, how does the appeal process work backwards up the chain? So if there's an enforcement on a violation, is there a process for the person to come back and say, well, I don't really feel like this was a violation? Those would be things I'd be curious on, and
Yeah,
and
I think as
this
far
would
as a
be
dress
everyone.
code, it's not necessarily an enforcement / discipline. It's more of a correction and just helping them understand what it is. I guess if you had someone who showed up wearing athletic clothes every day and wouldn't follow the recommendation, you'd have to have consideration for further steps, but
Right, and I was just wondering if it would be wise to build something in there so that there's the ebb and flow there to where there's an understanding laid out of enforcement, and then here's a process back if you feel like you're being unfairly targeted or anything like that, that there's a mechanism back. If that would, and I'll lean to your expertise on if that's
okay.
good in general
I'll
resource
ask other
management.
departments to
and-
see
and see
what
if-
they're doing.
Even if it's an issue or not, right?
Okay.
And maybe there's some exceptions too. I mean, somebody breaks their knee or their leg, and they have to come, and they can't,
Sure.
dress
Sure.
technically according to the
Right.
dress code.
Yeah, the sheriff couldn't wear 2 shoes for a long time.
Don't have a 2-shoe requirement, so. Okay, all right, I understand. Okay, thanks.
Okay, then I will move that we strike regular agenda item 7 from the agenda.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second to strike under regular agenda item number 7. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay, we need every single one of them.
Everyone that I knew.
Every one.
Okay. This is when I wish I was that micro machine guy from my youth. I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, water rights, or water shares for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session agenda items.
Second?
I got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated in number 8. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0.
I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for strategy session to discuss the sale of real property, water rights, or water shares previously publicly noticed for sale for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session agenda items.
Second?
We got a motion and a second to approve a set a date, time, and location for number 9 as stated on the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You didn't state that it passed.
Oh, that passed 3-0.
I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session agenda items.
Second?
Second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated in number 10 on the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0.
I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session agenda items.
Second?
Get a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location for, as stated, number 11. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0. Okay, we've got 3 work session items. We've got the art board here, and if you'd like to start coming up, and then also, we have 2 other discussions, and we'll just go in order as they're listed on the agenda. Please make sure and state your name for the record.
I'm Rochelle Wise. I'm the president of the Utah County Art Board. And this is the first time I've ever been to a commissioners meeting. So I'm definitely impressed with just watching your procedures. The Utah County Art Board keeps the art on your walls of the Health and Justice Building. And I'm just here to say, first of all, hello. And second, we're going to need a contract renewed by next year, so I want to make sure everything is going satisfactory to your group. And if you have any additional requests, I would like to know about them as the year proceeds, so we have our contract ready and secured for the upcoming year. And also, we have the Children's Festival is coming up this Friday. And I believe we've been put in for permits and everything on it. I'm not quite certain how, if we're finalized on the permits all the way. I don't know if we needed approval here or from Public Works. But I think it's not gonna be super big. We've got a few tents outside, and then we're gonna have maybe a couple food vendors. And we're doing our best to make sure there's no popcorn this year so that the marathon will run smoothly the day after. So that popcorn on the floor is a doozy to clean up. So we're doing that. And then wanted to invite any of the 3 of you, if you'd like to come down on Friday. The awards ceremony starts at 7. So if any of you would like to commit today to be there by 6:30, you're welcome to come present the prizes to the children. And we've got 3 different age groups and little trophies and gifts and stuff for them. And it would be nice for them to see those that help us from a step up.
I believe that we are planning on it.
So would you like to come?
I will not be there. I've got a family event that's.
Okay, so Greg, you'll be there
I will
for
be
us?
there.
Okay, awesome. We'll love to
And-
have
and
you
I-
there.
I believe I'd emailed in a response that I unfortunately had another commitment already planned.
Okay,
for
but
that
Greg
day,
will be
but
there.
I will
Well,
be
that's awesome. We just need one person, so
I
that'd
really
just be
appreciate the
fun.
invitation, so.
Well, and it's not a have to, it's a get to, because we can hand out invitations, just, the presentations, just fine, the awards. And then we have one other question for you. In the foyer of the Health and Justice Building, there were 2 large containers that held trees or plants or something in the front foyer. And the plants have all died, and the trees or whatever that were in there no longer exist. And it's our wish and desire to keep using the space as well as we can for artwork. And we would love to come up with a proposal to put glass display cases over those 2 spots. And we could be able to display small sculptures and show them, give just another layer of diversity for the artwork, able to be enjoyed and displayed for serving the county. And if you would approve that, I will, or approve the idea even, saying, yes, we'd like to hear it, I will go ahead and proceed to get 3 bids from different individuals on what it would cost, and I will come back with some numbers and see if you are
I'd also
interested.
like to see what it would look like.
Yeah, and a proposal, I can do that too. We
Just
can,
make sure and work with Richard or Don on that.
work with who?
Richard, yeah.
Richard and Don.
Richard.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, very good.
I think that they were calling that modern art, though, is what.
Modern art. Well, I think we'll probably have a lot of children's pieces in it. There are some artists in Utah County that are incredible marble sculptors. And in the past, we tried displaying them and people were hanging on them in the halls, and these are $10,000 sculptures and stuff. And they have to be locked up. We do not want children swinging from you know.
Anything.
Yeah, anything. We don't want that. So it's just, I think it would be something fun to do, and it would be nice, and it'll help some more artists. And it might be a way, we bring in a small amount of funding through selling some artwork. It might sell a few more pieces and generate a small amount more income for our smaller organization and give us a little bit more so we can serve with. So, all right, well, I'll talk to him
Thank you for
then.
what you guys do.
All right, thank you kindly.
Thank you. Okay. You're up, Bryce.
Bryce Armstrong, Community Development. So I'm not sure if Commissioner Ivy, if you want to tee this up a little bit, or
Sure. Absolutely. So, was brought to my attention an issue that we have potentially in our land use ordinance that's perhaps prohibitive to the good of a particular community, and that is the practice of commercial agricultural repair. Shops are currently forbidden by our land use ordinance in the agricultural zone. Recognizing that there are gifted individuals in the mechanical field that provide services to tractors, swathers, self-propelled hay haulers, various other farm equipment, and that it's often very hard on your own facility to break a tractor apart to replace a clutch or tear it apart, and that doing so on your own property may pose some significant environmental risks if it's not in a contained setting. I wanted to explore the option of looking at exempting out commercial agricultural repair shops so that we could have within the agricultural community some guidelines and a place that people could take their equipment to have it be repaired, and also providing a service to the community, and also providing an opportunity to continue to work and operate a business that matches the spirit and the point of a zone. To provide services and obviously earn their own income off of their land. So I thought this was an opportunity to address that.
and so what staff has done is kind of created a checklist or a talking point list that we've included for this discussion to kind of get some feedback from the commission to see what direction we want to go with this. We've suggested allowing it as a permitted use in the residential agricultural zone. We suggested maybe some having the ability to have a home on the parcel that'd be associated with the business, that kind of maybe give some oversight there. Again, these are just suggestions. Our other zones that we do allow mechanical work do not require a home, but those aren't in residential zones. They're in our or our neighborhood commercial zone and our industrial zone. And then we've also listed a number of different requirements you can see under number 2 to maybe contemplate maybe having another section in our chapter 3 ordinance, or a section of our ordinance that lists different requirements that need to be met for a permitted use, which we do for a lot of our other uses.
Yeah.
And so we kind of want to maybe get your feedback on some of these ideas and see what direction you wanted to go.
So 2C, for example, talks about concerns over long-term parking.
Yes.
What that reminds me of is our discussion a couple of years ago for the American Fork Haunted House and the concern of structures versus looking like a dump.
Right.
But it also, at the same time, that's kind of a sensitive thing, right? Because for the same example of a paving window, during the winter, it may be harder or not necessary to potentially work on something. So I think we need to be sensitive as far as what the storage looks like. I'm okay with potentially a time frame, right? But I mean, there's a lot of sensitivity because parts, it could be an older machine.
Sure.
Some of these things are too big to maybe, break down, and we don't want to penalize the business owner who's probably also calling the owner saying, please come get this, and that, can't fix it, whatever. So sensitive, but at the same time, want to make sure there's some protections, because it's the surrounding landowners that will come back to us and say, you're devaluing my property. That tractor looks like garbage, and may or may not, but for them, that's going to be a big deal. So I want to be sensitive to all involved, but let's make sure we talk about that in
Yeah,
the
that's
ordinance.
kind of the balance there to,
Yeah.
that's kind of part of the business. And so you try and balance that with the ability to, number one, regulate, have an ordinance that's enforceable, but also be sensitive to this being a residential agricultural zone. And so,
Yeah. I mean, right off the bat, I'm kind of thinking if we have a year from date of receipt, and we, in our ordinance, have our, our business owners have a date of receipt on property a year that it's tagged that we can modify, inspect that.
You're thinking
Seems
more of
reasonable.
a timeframe for
Yeah.
the storage of, whether it's, we originally couched this as having these be licensed or registered as
Right.
farm equipment. And so, but, you don't want to get a situation where there's something that's unlicensed there and.
Right.
And kept there.
And that's why, to me, a year, so again, if they use them during the fall, they then bring them back at the end of the fall and want to potentially store them here for maintenance, whatever, right? You're still in that time frame, and they, even if they take a season, whatever.
What about the thought of them being in an enclosed building or, that's gonna add some expense, obviously, but, what we've
I
seen in.
hate to make that as a regulation. I think that it's kind of like storing your boat, right? There are some that are covered, there are some that are not. And I think it's up to the individual owner of the farm equipment to decide whether or not they want to participate with that business, because maybe it's not protected from the elements, but I think that's more of the business will weed itself out and see the need and come to the need.
Yeah.
So,
What about the work being done in an enclosed structure, though? There's not I can see you're gonna have equipment here and there and
Yep.
all over.
Yep.
So when years and years ago, when I started a home business, now this is in the city, so I know I'm trying to get to a point on it. I had the fire marshal show up, I had to go through they had to go and count to see, make sure that I had, and then they want to know how much space was going to be used, and if there's a garage was going to be used, and then because it was a service-oriented business, they were very particular about parking on the outside. They didn't want me showing up with parking 10 or 12 trucks and a trailer outside on the streets, and then the neighbors would begin going crazy over that, having all those vehicles, and then people showing up in the morning, and they were very concerned about that. How do we do this, knowing that it's, again, we want to promote business. We want to make sure that businesses have the opportunity. It is their property, but their neighbor also should have access down the roads, and there's a balance there that I don't know where we go as we look at this issue, and there's some concern there. So I don't know how we, again, allow for, I think from what I read down to this one here, that it was actually licensed as a mobile service, which mobile services are, I've called individuals to come. Usually what happens is I start working on my car and I get to the point where I'm stuck and I can't do anything. So I'll call a mobile service. They'll come out, help fix whatever's going on, and then they move on. And so I don't know what the thought process there is. Would they have to change their mobile service to now a facility?
Well, the
type of
idea was,
service?
currently, you could have a home occupation that is for a mobile service, and that's probably kind of the only option that we have in the RA5 zone, and so that's kind of what Commissioner Ivey had the concern with.
Right.
We, kind of had the wording here on number 2 to allow a mobile service as part of a shop. And that kind of makes sense. If someone who has a shop, they also have the ability to have a mobile service. And I don't think that would be super intrusive on the property. Right now, we allow mobile service. We probably need to bump up some of the equipment and vehicle limitations. That's also considered as part of this process. But kind of get back to your original point, that's kind of the challenge we face. We have several of these out in the county just for automobile general repair, and they're hard to monitor, and they tend to accumulate vehicles, and that's kind of the nature of the business, and so they do kind of end up being somewhat of an enforcement issue. And so what we're hoping is to craft something up front that there's an understanding of what those limitations are, and once they're understood and known up front, then also that they're enforceable. And so, if adjacent property owner does have an issue and it does violate what is allowed, then they have some remedy that we can easily determine that it is in violation.
So when I did my business, we had to go around to the neighbors and ask the question, if they were okay with that business model being in the neighborhood, just because of the nature of the trucks and trailers that potentially could be there at periods of time, or guys coming from their homes and then parking their vehicles and getting in a truck and then taking off and doing some service. So is that something that would be a part of it, or is it not?
We haven't generally done that. you know, that's, I guess, something that you guys can really contemplate. You're basically, I guess, in that situation, asking for consent from your adjoining property owners, or whatever distance you want to determine to allow.
I don't know if consent's right, but anyway,
Yeah.
but
But yeah, I mean, we can certainly do a notification
Yeah.
and kind of build that into it. You touched on another issue that's on number 2 is employees. Generally, our home occupations don't allow outside employees, and so shops usually, you know, depending on their scope, may have some outside employees that actually come for the day and are working on, you know, mechanic or whatever. And so that's something we probably want to consider in this situation, again, knowing this is an RA5 zone and having that balance. Trying to think what else we have in here. Obviously, they would have to meet all our health and fire and building codes, and those can be a struggle out in the county with,
That's where I think they'll be the most upset, is finding out what some of those requirements are. That's really where there's a lot of added cost as well.
yeah, and we try and be as upfront as possible. Obviously,
Sure.
the fire marshal may have some different, you know, tools to meet that, whether it's, you know, what kind of storage he's gonna provide. And so, you know, we try and build into the general understanding that you're gonna have to meet certain codes and safety codes, especially when you're talking about enclosed buildings and heat sources and everything that might be associated with.
Enclosed buildings are gonna require water tanks for fires, and, I mean,
Yeah.
it starts add up quickly.
Yeah, and that's somewhat prohibitive in the county in general, from a cost perspective, so. So anyway, just kind of wanted to kind of get your feedback and what direction you want us to head. Obviously, this is one that we could draft a sample ordinance, run it through the planning commission, and then be back to you, and you can utilize that new change you made this morning and, you know, approve it, deny it, or make modifications at that point. And so we just kind of want to get your feedback and see where you want to go, and
Yeah, I think.
what are your main concerns?
I think for me, specifically, you've asked the right questions in your subsets of number 2, and those are the questions that we have to address. Obviously, my feelings somewhat, as far as long-term parking and storage of vehicles, I think the vehicles should have to be being actively worked on, right? I mean, that could take a month or two. Well, you'll have to come up with some type of definition for it, but I'm not looking at a storage facility for farm equipment. I'm looking at an opportunity for somebody to take their equipment and get it fixed, and not to be parked there. So I think there would be some type of revision that it's being actively worked on, as far as and then that takes care of the long-term storage. Obviously, it needs to meet safety requirements. We have building and fire safety codes for a reason, to protect individuals and neighbors, so they have to meet those requirements. And then it's up to the individual business owner to decide if that's economically feasible for them to meet those requirements. As far as the parking issue, specifically along the side of the road, given the structure and size of our county roads, I don't think it's permissible. It's a safety issue. And so we're gonna craft into there protections that make sure we're not causing safety concerns and issues. And I think as far as the proper storage and disposal of fuels, that's part of the beauty of actually having this, is that we can have it done in a contained, controlled facility. We're having less leakage and less problems from it being done, you know, in somebody's backyard. So we're actually providing an enhanced environmental protection by having it housed at one particular shop, and then enforcement becomes easier, because it's a whole lot easier to go there and make sure that they're meeting those environmental standards. So it gives us an enforceability standpoint that helps us avoid, you know, contamination issues that are just very much uncontrollable otherwise. And so I think we're directing that to a more centralized source, because more people are going to utilize it if it's there and it's economical. And then I was trying to see if there was any others.
Maybe the distance from dwellings, that's something that,
Yep, the distance from dwellings, obviously, again, becomes a safety standard, and it's gonna have to meet some setback requirements. Again, it's finding that proper balance of protecting your neighbor's rights versus yours. We're trying to afford the opportunity for people to exercise a right on their property, but that shouldn't be done if it causes endangerment or harm to their neighbor at a significant level, right? So again, I think those are reasonable things that we can we can look at. From my standpoint, the employee limits, I think we have to make sure we're consistent with whatever it is we're doing. But obviously, I think there would be some flexibility to allow some employees there. And my suggestion and thought on that would be it could potentially be on a sliding scale based on acreage. So hypothetically, if you have a 5-acre operation, you can have 2 employees. If you have a 40-acre facility, you could have,
Non-family employees.
yeah, non-family. If you've got 40 acres, it's gonna give you more parking space, and obviously it makes sense that you could have some more, right? So I don't know exactly what the numbers would look like on that, but you could set that up on an applicable scale, ratio to size, so that, you know, again, we're providing enough space to perform the activity within the acreage that we have there.
What are your feelings on requiring this accessory to an existing dwelling? Is this something that you think should be required, or
So the
have
thought
a
that just
standalone
came into
business?
mind with that, for example, was because we're, for the most part, when we're dealing with our agriculture, we're talking the south end of the county, right?
Generally.
Predominantly, okay? I guess my recommendation would be, before this goes to planning commission, one, because I want to make sure that our amendment is done before we have to deal with the legalities of who has the say, is potentially talk to Payson City, Spanish Fork City, Salem City, and see what their ordinances are as far as if they have them for these, because if they have them for these, maybe we want to modify some of these, because some of these areas could be in potential annexation plans or things like that, and so that there's more consistency and uniformity, you know, and we can also address it in that. So maybe a little of research on that, you know, it shouldn't be hard to find that, I wouldn't guess. So that would be kind of my recommendation to, as far as, you know, whether it's attached to dwellings or this or that, or maybe even on the employee scale, they might already have those, and we may find one that's working. They may say, yeah, we hate this or whatever, and we can, you know, find the best of all.
You know, another thought, the reason why we have industrial areas and commercial areas is because sometimes their operations go into the night, the hours of operation and the noise levels, I don't know where that all fits, but that's the reason why we usually cluster with commercial, because if you're in those areas, and we even have industrial protection areas for that specific reason, just like we do agricultural protection areas, knowing that you're going to have lights and you're going to have traffic and those kind of things. And so some of that needs to be considered as we look at this, how that affects, neighbors
Sure, yep.
and business.
And just for clarification, I want to make sure it's understood, this is for agricultural equipment.
Right.
It's equipment used in the production and marketing of farm goods.
Correct, yep.
So we're talking, tractors, swathers, balers, combines, hay haulers. I think light-duty pickups, if they are farm registered, and/or we could explore like primarily used for the transportation of livestock would be a potential exemption there, right? So
because that is in our agricultural zone, is some of that.
right, and so it's, again, this is a very specific type of exemption here that we're
How would you get a
looking for.
farm truck down the road legally to a space like this?
You tow it. and you
Have
just-
to.
Yeah, you
You
have
have to be
yeah,
either towed or hauled.
It's
because
towed or hauled. You can't legally drive it. So,
That's the benefit of having the mobile service, I think.
and
is
that's why I think you offer the mobile service as part of it, because they can come to you, but again, if it makes sense to have it in a shop, if it's the middle of winter in the blizzard and I've got to have my tractor running and I can tow it down the road, it makes sense to have that opportunity in a setting like that.
Okay.
Or the farm truck, if it's a farm truck that's used for feeding, right?
Right.
And then you need to get it running because it's the middle of winter. It'd be nice to do it inside of a building where the equipment and tools are at.
Another thought too is, you talked about an accessory or, with the home that's there, potentially the home that's there. We wouldn't be looking at this as being an agricultural structure then.
No,
So that you would have to change the whole definition of what the structure would be that's gonna be in use.
Right, yeah, we'd have to, I mean, they would not be exempt from the building code requirements that agricultural structures are because
Right.
of the occupancy and the different mechanics that would be associated with that structure, so.
They're gonna have to meet state statute guidelines for those particular structures.
Yeah, because they have hoist and everything,
Right.
that's a whole different
Right,
ballgame.
right,
than-
those would all have to meet code and be inspected, sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a little bit of freedom, highly regulated.
Options.
Yes.
We'll call it options on this one.
There we go.
Okay.
So I guess what we could do is, if we have a general consensus here, we could go ahead and draft a proposed amendment, take it to the planning commission, and then get their recommendation and bring it back to you. It'd probably be in the planning commission's meeting in June, I think with the deadlines that we're facing. So if that's
That would make,
a feeling, we'll head in that direction.
Okay. Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, Robert, you're up.
I'm Robert Moore, County Attorney's Office. What's before you today, let me give you a little background. As you know, Utah County has the most ag protection areas in the state by quite a bit. We have over 70, and Peggy can give you probably the exact number what we have. And in the Utah statute related to ag protection, it does, once an ag protection area has been approved, it does currently require you to review that on the 20th calendar year. So we discussed that as staff and worked with the commission, who then worked with legislatures to make a modification, and that is SB or Senate Bill 15 that was approved this year and goes into effect pretty quick, which changed one word from shall to may as far as the review process. Again, we're talking about existing ag protection areas, not ones that are being proposed or considered. These are for existing ones. And so I was, in my discussion with the commission, we wanted to craft some sort of a policy or some sort of a ordinance that would address how we would do that. And we currently have an ordinance under Utah County Code 26-3-9. And so my proposal today in front of you is to amend that and amend it in such a way that basically the county commission performs an initial review of these ag protection areas. And part of the issue, let me step back 1 second, part of the issue in the reviews is we have some that have 10,000 acres, and the noticing, the requirements, it's a very lengthy and cumbersome process in some ways. Staff heavy, intensive as far as getting things done with that, and some of these, honestly, most of them are not even. What's the word I'm looking for? Probably not even a concern to most people. It makes a lot of sense, and they're not controversial in any way. So the proposal that I have before you today basically says that the county commission will perform an initial review of these renewals. Again, renewals we're talking about. And if the county commission determines that, by the way, in your initial determination, you can make basically 3 different looks, whether it should be continued, modified, or terminated. Again, we're talking about existing ag protection areas. If you decide that you may want to consider modifying or terminating that, then, again, we're talking about existing ag protection areas, you would then go through the full process to do so. Because you might be modifying or changing what's currently happening, the status quo, if you will. If you decide that you're not going to modify or change the status quo, modify or terminate the status quo, and just continue on, or you take no action at all, then it would automatically renew for the additional 20 years.
Which
my
then
opinion,
allows the landowner to withdraw at their discretion.
yes, that's always the option anytime. And again, I think it's meant to, honestly, I think it's a pro-ag amendment here, because you're not, the only time you're ever going to really go through the full process is if you think that you might modify or
Well,
terminate.
this whole bill was a pro-Utah County. Our legislators and senators stepped up big time for us. in helping us, because the burden for Utah County, if Mr. Stevens thought it was tough to get through our problems here, this would have hampered our time greatly.
Sure. And I'll say, as far as the criteria you can determine for your initial review, I have not put that in here. Honestly, I think what we've talked about in the past, if you've received a number of complaints, you've mentioned that that might be something you might want to consider going through the full process. But as I said, most of these go through no complaints, no concerns, and it's not a problem.
Right.
It's the one, there are a couple that you do hear about, and those are the ones that you may decide that you may want to take a look at it, a full look, and that would be, but that would certainly be a more of a limited, I would think, role, as opposed to every single one having to be reviewed on the 20th year, because we're starting to have those this year, and we'll continue to have those going forward. And next year, we have some very, very large ones.
Right.
So that was part
Can
of it. Please.
if you could help me on this, anytime I see a color, red line, it causes problems. I cannot identify what the changes are. And so I don't see a red line.
It's also underlined.
I don't see an
There's
underline.
nothing on the amended or red line that's underlined
Is
or.
that, okay, I thought maybe just my color blindness was, I couldn't
I apologize,
see
then.
it,
I
but
thought we had uploaded a red line version for
There is a
you.
red line version uploaded.
But there's nothing
There's
redlined
redlined,
or
there's
nothing
nothing.
underlined on it.
Okay, so, are you in Word right now? Are you in Word?
I'm on it's the PDF upload.
On the
Oh,
PDF.
okay, thank you, this will be helpful.
You can have my copy as well.
Okay.
Well, they're kind of reviewing that, Robert. I think I'll just ask the one question. It's a question that's been posed to me. How would a citizen be able to know that this was coming up for renewal, and how would they go about reaching out? My initial thought is, well, obviously you would contact your elected official, but there was a question about, well, how do we even know if they're coming up for renewal? And I thought that was a legit question, and then obviously their first reaction would be to reach out to the elected official, one of the commissioners who's going through the review process on it, because all of them are reviewed by us. But there was a question about how would we even know?
Well, I think the one good thing is, you don't know how long you don't know when the 20 years started and when it's coming for renewal, like you said. Certainly they can contact Peggy Kelsey, who is great about that, and she has the records for those things. I also think that to the benefit of the public is that they can file a written complaint at any time. And we would keep those. And when the time came up for renewal, we would present those to you in the commission meeting in your initial review. So we would have copies of all complaints, any concerns that we have received in-house, and would provide those to you. Now, whether you receive the complaint yourself and then forward it to us to maintain and keep, or whether we receive them through community development, or whether other departments.
Do you mean complaints after the approval? So for example, the last one we just did, you don't document those as complaints until, so now if there was a complaint filed.
Correct. I think going forward, we would be looking at that.
Well, if I could chime in on this one, I mean, I
Please.
spent a lot of time on this one, that question did come up even from a few legislators. The way it's written now with the May, really does give us a lot of latitude.
Yes.
And I think part of what we're trying to accomplish here with this is being sensitive to just that question that you're saying there. So when it comes before the county commission, I feel like, and I feel like we probably should write this down and put it in there, that there are certain levels that we go to that they shall do. And the shall may be, a notification in the paper or a public notice website, something like that we're doing, so that that's taken care of. And then the may, continues from there. But it really leaves it up to the commission to say what that
Are
process
you
is
saying
gonna
even
look
if we
like.
don't have staff go through the whole process, you're talking
We're
on the
just talking-
initial, if we were gonna
Yeah,
continue?
because I think that's a legitimate question, because who sits around and puts on their little, their clock and says, well, I'd like to make comment on this thing 20 years down the road. And, I mean, no one does that, time clicks along, and next thing you know, you missed the opportunity. And so I think that as a commission, we should put a few things in that are the shalls, which is the protections, so that there's at least a certain amount of notification that goes out there. If they're next to a city, you know, possibly we notify the city that this is going, you know, this is coming up. That we do a little bit of notification, maybe in a paper, something like that to throw the notification out there that this is happening. I don't know if we need to do the whole thing where we put signs around all over the place. That's the expense that we're trying to alleviate, but I think our responsibility to let others know that there's consideration needs to be taken into consideration.
And it will be on your
And I
agenda,
was gonna
certainly.
say, I think part of that is it's going to be on our, publicly noticed on the agenda that it's coming up for initial review.
That's correct.
So if people regularly check the agenda of what we're doing, they would be brought aware that this is coming up for initial review.
I feel a responsibility that needs to be done. They need to know. We're not trying to do anything,
Right.
you know, just to make it faster and quicker and simpler so we don't spend money so we can hide it from anybody. We want to make sure that area is covered.
Bryce Armstrong, staff again. In answer to your specific question, Commissioner Ivy, every ag protection area does have a notice of creation that is recorded on the subject property. And so anyone from the public can go and retrieve that record, at least so they know when it was originally created and say, okay, this was done in 1999, so in 2019 I gotta kind of be paying attention. And so that information is recorded information that
Yeah, but
they
no
would
one
have
knows
access
that.
to.
Yeah, not only that, they,
Well, I know, but
they
that's
have
a place they can
span of
look.
a
Right.
week to find it on our agenda.
Well, I'm just talking about the creation of the original ag protection, so they at least have a window of when they know it'll be up for its review.
And hopefully lots of people are watching today so that they heard that and now know, right? That's the theory. We're trying to get this information out there. Thank you, Bryce.
So even in the current version, again, initial review comes before you in a commission meeting. You guys then make that determination whether you're going to,
How far?
Right, but I think Commissioner Lee's point is valid. I have no problem with the red line, now that I can see the red line. It was in there, I just didn't know that was the ad. But I think there's a little bit of adding to still do, potentially.
yeah, and this is just a work
again,
session item.
Because of conversations with the legislators and,
Yeah. And this is just a work session.
It was
for
a
us
work session. It was meant to
kinda
be
talk
a-
about the idea.
This is your ordinance, not, and so you decide how you want
And
to
I mean,
look.
I'm even open to, if, we want to have different levels of noticing based on complaints. Again, going back to range of employees or, one complaint over 20 years might not constitute a full-blown certain type of notification, whereas, we get complaints quite often on certain ones, and those ones probably need to be noticed a little more heavily, and maybe we even expand our notification area for that. So, anyway.
So what's your pleasure at this point?
Well,
Keep going.
Okay,
we'll have more discussions on it, I think.
fair enough.
Let's work.
We can do
work
that
through
on
it.
maybe on an individual basis. I can bring it back to you at some point.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I know Peggy's still very relieved we got at least the law changed.
Oh, yeah, that's, and again, I don't think, and this law also applies to it's agricultural and industrial, which we don't have any in our county, but there are other counties that it does apply to, so, it was one up on the hill that was an interesting one to go back and forth, but it sailed through pretty quick, and it was not really, contested. They just saw it on a basis of spending a lot of money for no effort, so they allowed us to change that word. So it's a good process. Gives us some flexibility. Okay. That's it with our work session items. Public comment. Is there any public comment today? Okay.
Hi, my name is Robert Stevens. I live in Provo, Utah. I'd like to ask you, so what's the process of creating or changing a regulation? Because I hear that you seem to have a work session and the staff's involved. Is there anything else that I'm missing in this process?
Well, generally it comes from somebody like yourself would come and meet with a commissioner, and then we would start talking to our attorneys or staff, depending on where it is, at least in my case, and go find out really what the regulation is, where is we created, and talk to them about some of the harm or complaints that they've also received on that, and go through, that process.
So, so if you make a regulation that affects a farmer, or the farmers all brought in, I mean, or a bunch of farmers all brought into a room and consulted?
Well, I want to be careful that we're on a public comment, and so it's not really, we're not in a work session. Let's just put
Okay.
it that. We're
No,
not
I
in
just
a,
wanted to ask in general how things are
Yeah.
done, that's all.
I mean, yeah, it's not possible to bring everybody that's affected into the same room and have a discussion. That's not our form of government.
So is anybody who's affected asked into a room for
course.
consultation?
Yes, of course.
Okay, on these latest, regulations on noxious weeds, were there any developers consulted?
On obnoxious weeds?
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm sure there's probably lots of conversations that are going on that I don't know about.
okay. I was just wondering if in establishing your regulation and in writing up your new regulations, if any developers were actually consulted who would have been affected by any changes that you would have made to your regulations. Okay, so there are, is it okay if I get my notes real quick?
Sure.
So I'm a person who had to pay a total of $500 for the removal or the inspection of noxious weeds on my farm, and I was just kind of wondering some things about that. So there are 2,003 square miles of land in the county and 141 square miles of water. So so if I develop a 5.25 acre parcel and I pay a total of $500 to have someone inspect to see if my property has noxious weeds, how long would it take again for those weeds to go reappear on my property? I mean, because we have, if we have a total of 2,000 square miles and over 95%, I believe, of the land is outside of the incorporated cities, so it seems like seeds blow all over the place, and it shouldn't take too long before obnoxious weeds appears again on my property. I mean, has anyone ever looked into that?
I'm sure Aaron does all the time.
Aaron, who's Aaron?
He's our weed specialist.
Oh, okay. So, if I laser level on my property, which removes all noxious weeds, or at least it buries them, right, or moves them around and destroys their roots, would I still be required to pay for the removal of noxious weeds? Because that's a laser leveling, it's just flat, and all the weeds are gone. There's just nothing visible anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. And the
No?
thing is,
Okay.
that this is a public comment period, so it's not really a question and answer
Okay.
period. So that's the
It's
reason
not
why it
question
feels
and answer, okay.
awkward. Yeah.
So where is a place that if you're making a rule on obnoxious weeds, then I or another person who's a developer would be able to ask questions before the regulations are established?
I would contact Public Works and start with Aaron
Okay,
Eager.
okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we will move into our closed meeting sessions then. Thank you.